Feels like a risky question.
Risky?
Yes, risky. Maybe every question is risky. It was mentioned in the opening circle before you have been here in the first evening, I think by you. Just the awareness in this work for collective suffering. And I'm shy bringing it up because it's so easy to say that we know what it is needed for unwinding from the suffering or global regulation of the whole collective system. And I still was very touched, or I am very touched, that there is this courage here, giving words to the realness of suffering anyway. And here is so much bliss, and human beings are so vast in their potential, and my question is, why are we still so weak when it comes to a global impact that stays forever? Like, how much do we have to laugh until children are less beaten up? Something like that. It's like, or maybe without all of these Buddhas, we would be dead already, all of us, maybe. So that is maybe even or already an effect of enlightenment that is, but it's, yeah. Or in more practical words, how can I position my private hobby of spiritual unfoldment into something that pays off for others as well? Just because not because I need to be Mother Teresa, but because it would be even more consequent as a private practice to embody the collective as well. I feel so disappointed that Jesus existed and created that little that helps us today. I'm 20 years younger than you, and like, I can worry about my spiritual development in 2030, but I need to worry about climate change, because then it's irreversible. And it's so... I have just one more thing.
Take your time.
I imagine us, for example, being that coherent and realigned internally and as a group nervous system, that we can go as a hacker gang of consciousness into the collective field and do an operation there, not because of attachment of saving the world, just because acting as if we could save the world is still more alive than putting a spiritual blah blah on top of it just in order to hide our helplessness and cowardness. We can't go the path of words. We can't do another interview with you and then make everybody watch it and then everybody understands. Having time is such a privilege. But maybe on the energetic level. And if you have any diagram, another one maybe, with layers of consciousness in the collective field, where is the problem? Where do we have to enter it? Could you enter it? What can we do? We have to... I can stop talking, I'm sorry. I don't want to be misunderstood as being attached to saving the world. It's my fear of my death, I get that, but if I take just love serious, if I just believe in anything like love, I still act as if I would save the world just because it's the only thing that's truthful enough. Thank you for listening.
There is no answer that can be satisfactory, simply because this what you speak of, and this what moves you so greatly, that makes you feel so distressed about it, cannot be reconciled at the level of trust, or at the level of well, this is how things are. Look at this. This is how things are. But there is something that refuses to understand that, because something that you need to experience. What I therefore will invite you to reflect on instead is a possibility that things, the way they seem, completely out of whack, completely in a state of utter and entire discoordination, where everything is violated, absolutely everything. Not just this aspect, that aspect, or that aspect. Everything, absolutely everything is violated at this moment in time. So in other words, this what can be spoken in terms of the laws of nature themselves are violated. This violation of the laws of nature is in itself a culprit of why we, as the most evolved consciousness on the planet, act in a way that we do. Think in the way that we do. You see? It's in the nature of these laws of nature. But there is this catch-22. A catch-22. We can deflect all responsibility, as you have pointed out, that, can the spiritual blabbering and all the rest of it really help anything that what is now being witnessed by all of us as what we're doing, let's say, collectively to straightforwardly to the planet, right? And in every sense of that, right? Doing it to ourselves. And the areas are not just the obvious areas, like, right? For instance, one of the biggest BCs is the recycling. Like, let's recycle. But there's nothing to recycle, because you can't recycle that what is unrecyclable. So it's just to clear the consciousness, just to make us feel, just to make us feel that we're doing our part, doing our due. And that is also part of being enchanted by the system, in the system, doing our due. I do that in a household, because I cannot just take this. In Mallorca, you cannot dump stuff. There are rubbish collection points. And you are accountable because there are people who work there, they see. Anytime they can open your bags and fine you. You still have to do that. But in the end it goes to the same thing. So this example with rubbish, with waste, is symptomatic to the civilization we live in now. It's the great scam. It's a big scam. Nothing really is recycled. It cannot be recycled. And yet the production of that must go on, you know, because we don't want to have, we can't say no to that, what isn't being produced. You know, even the plastic industry was, in a way, invented to support the military needs of the Second World War, because airplanes need to be lighter. And it was invented in the United States. So the United States was selling plastic to Nazi Germany to make the airplanes lighter. So when the war was over, the billionaires' families did not like the idea that the war is over, you know, because there are factories, there are dynasties, kids go to school, right? You have to take care of business, right? Families get bigger, needs get bigger. So the need rose to make sure that plastic is needed in every household. Before that, there was no plastic. It's a little detour. I will come back. I just want to kind of like take off the edge a little, because so it doesn't feel like we're jumping head on. Do you believe me if I tell you that I did not held a plastic object until I was in my, I don't know, maybe late teens? I didn't know what plastic was. There was no plastic in my house. Nothing plastic. Yeah, plenty of metal, wood, you know. Rubber, yeah, rubber. But no plastic. No plastic. Anything. So when first, like, you held plastic, it felt like kind of an amazing thing from the West, before it was produced in China. I'm talking about, you know, a long time ago. There was no plastic. Dolls made in Soviet Union at that time are collector's items because they're made of the material which is not plastic. It's ebonite. It's highly, highly praised in Japanese culture today. If you buy an ebonite hairbrush made in Germany, it would set you off some 25, 35 euros. Just a hairbrush. Because it's lasting. You're not going to throw it away tomorrow. So all this industry was invented, and consumers were convinced they cannot live without it. It was even, in the early years, household members, people, women in the States, were recycling the plastic. They buy something packaged. And why to throw it away? It's hard, it's durable, I'll keep it, I'll use it. So the producers realized, well, this is not gonna cut, you know, because they're not getting the message. So the message was that don't bother, you know, like there's much more fun things to do there. You can do your nails and have fun haircut like Marilyn Monroe. You can do much more fun things. Discard it, darling. Here is the bin, special bin for you. Chuck it in. And it's gone thinner, it's gone nastier, it's gone more and more volatile. So plastic industry today was in invention. In the aftermath of the Second World War. There was no plastic in the world. It's hard to believe there was no plastic in the world. There was no need for plastic. No plastic bags, no plastic sheets, no plastic in any way and in any form. No, it's obviously not about plastic. It's not about plastic. It's about how things happen. Something fundamentally is wrong in the value system that we embraced, enchanted by. And unfortunately, we are part of, and we cannot extricate ourselves from it, because it's a catch-22 system. And God, as I have said already, did arrivederci and no longer willing to do anything here. Okay? It's like, kids, you are on your own, all right? Goodbye. You've been good. Now you sort yourself out. Departed. So there is a very, very interesting phase that we have entered collectively also. It's this phase of self-destruction with the realization that actually everything is at the tip of our fingers, literally. This is, by the way, I don't need to draw another diagram. I get the sentiment. But, you know, like, that diagram shows that there is no place for God, no place for me. If you reflect on this, it's basically a complete and utter hermeneutic closure. So there are many layers in your sharing. In that what you have shared, there is a lament, there is agony, there is beg for hope. There's a flicker of hope, and there is also desperation for an answer. Correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe there is even some secret hope, and not so secret, to get a release, a relief from the burden under which you placed yourself as a conscious being. Not trying to read your mind, it's not about reading the mind, I'm just suggesting. There may be also this, like, when we tire it from carrying the cross, we want to have a relief. We want to have a release. At least to know what actually is going on. Did Jesus carry the cross? Was Jesus even there? Was he even crucified? What actually took place? We'll make like a leap now to come back again. I welcome you to delve into this teaching and understanding of what human being actually is, based on some of the ancient traditions which have been revived in our time, for our times. It's the Vedic perspective on a human being, revived entirely by the teachings of the Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, His Holiness Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. Before that, Sri Aurobindo Ghosh was speaking of the dawn of new civilization, where the radical departure is made from this domination of the Abrahamic traditions, of which is separated the whole creation on heaven and earth, hell, and so forth, which is basically a great division in the psyche. It's the tradition with which the Kashmir Shaivism, of course, operates and known for, that human being is a walking universe. Human being is not a solitary individual some insignificant or relatively significant affair. But in fact, human being is unexplicable, unexplainable mystery of that where God knows itself, herself. Knows not as an object of one's perception, of one's imagination, but knows intimately through the state of the communion. And in that knowing, consciousness again fully self-referral. In that self-referral state, the uniquely way of how our nervous system is wired is capable of resonating with the frequency which we do not yet have equipment to measure. We barely can measure some fundamental basics which yoga have known for thousands of years. We're speaking about frequencies much more refined, the frequencies beyond known categories in terms of what science operates with. And these frequencies in the knower of one's own reality. I'm not talking about any spiritual fireworks, any grandiose, extraordinary experiences. I'm talking about direct communion with being and how that is cognized. This frequency impacts the entire creation. And I'm glad that you are fully aware when you raised your eyes and brought that analogy. Maybe, if not for those Buddhas, then we would have been already in a very, very different place. Because this meeting of polarized perspectives on what and how this unique event that we experience here on this planet perhaps has been a place of constant struggle to what will save the day. So therefore, some of these energies are directly perceived, directly tapped into. These malignant, very, very, very volatile energies. Not how it is expressed in horrifying acts. This is already an expression, in a way, no matter how maybe disturbing this may sound to some ears. In a way, it's a kind of a release. In a way, even a war, it's a kind of a grand release of some energies that are accumulated. But what works behind the scenes is much more sinister, much more volatile, much more whatever that epithet may be given to it. So this holding that balance maybe have been going on for quite some times. I don't want to turn it again into that kind of a religious gloss, like they were that, because it begins to veer somehow in that direction. And we can find that again, all religions and all perennial traditions have that. We can find that in the laws, we can find that in scriptures, in religious revelations, right? And in every respective tradition we can see this, how the forces of light and forces of darkness are met often at the final hour, where that destiny is decided. But what I want to draw your attention is to this, even if as a possibility in your understanding, that there is infinitely more, and you already suggested that at the very first moment when you started to speak of how extraordinarily powerful we are, with the power that we are embedded with, that not known to us fully. And this understanding that the mystery of being human isn't that. So the monistic perspective, the monistic understanding here is not some kind of blasphemous audacity or a mega ego trip to kind of like have this placid sense of gratification in a I'm God. None of that. It's only in the actuality of that cognition where everything is held like this and met at that level. So therefore, when that is understood, and when that is also confirmed through direct access, through by hook or by crook, however, in whatever way, then no questions left. And all doubts are laid asunder in terms of what one's purpose and what one's duty is. Because if one is somehow has this propensity that I want to be of use, I want to be useful here, the most important understanding is the principle of like increases like. And that the greatest action is at the level of where the energy is at its peak. Where is the energy at its peak? In a state of a vacuum, now speaking in terms of the scientific language. The amount of energy in 1 cubic centimeter of pure vacuum, right, is equivalent of some astronomical, unbelievable, bewildering figure of so-called physical space-time of the universe concentrated in 1 cubic centimeter of vacuum. So the energy that what moves and shakes everything at the fundamental level, at the level of the unified field, is not where the greatest force is being utilized. So we may want to move mountains, we may want to do something to change the world, to change our attitudes, relationships. We want to do something here, tangibly, sort of something that is tactile and immediately felt, that this is, however little, step towards making a world a safer place, right? But not a single human being yet was able to come up with a physical action that will amount at bringing the changes, because everything is recycling. It goes back to recycling. All this talks about the new forms, renewal forms of energy is another scam. We're just lazy. We like good news because it gives that kind of like it's like taking a painkiller, numbing ourselves, you know, comfortably numb. Yeah, cool, you know, like this is what it is. Renewable forms of energy. There are no renewable forms of energy. Why even call them energy? No, we're sucking blood of Earth, black blood, from its belly. The whole industry is based on that. Every single conflict since First World War is based around that. The word geopolitics is about that. Unless, like some guy commented on one of the videos just like the other day, you go and read it yourself. It like made me like, whoo, whoo. Like the Russians and Americans don't fight. Don't worry about it. Since the revolution and the First World War, Americans and Russian elite already decided everything. The Stalin, all of them are, you know, who was like Stalin and Roosevelt probably were like having great holidays together somewhere in Swiss Alps, you know, drinking Armenian cognac, you know. Well, actually, it's Churchill who loved Armenian cognac, and I'm sure Stalin must have was sending it him secretly, you know. Nobody, like, it's all decided, like the fights and everything, because every military complex benefits, billions are made. It's a comment there, yeah, under this one of the videos, you know. So don't worry, folks, it's like, it's all fixed, long time ago. Russian Revolution was fixed, First World War was fixed, Second World, everything, even now is happening, all. Who knows, maybe. The point is not that. That's not really the point. That's not the point, isn't it? It goes back to that same scam of somehow believing things can be recycled. That somehow some stuff that is a result of a chemical reaction, because that's what all polyester is, and right? All acrylic polyester. You know how long I fought this war in the house? Mind-boggling. You know, like, don't buy acrylic or polyester clothes. It's not good. It's not good for health, not good for anyone. But the same goes for when we speak of the renewal forms of energy and all this. There is not a single solution inside that can be implemented at the level where countries gather together, greatest minds gather together, put a lot of, you know, it's all always serves some kind of agendas. These agendas come from highly politicized, again, driven by the same outlived paradigm, and it has no iota of what is going on. Because it's an outlived paradigm spinning itself out. It's spinning itself out. Our trajectory is already predetermined. Astrologers can tell you, really gifted astrologers who are also touched by divine gift of interpretation. They can see when it all began, and they can, many points, dots are given, and then you can join them together, and there's a trajectory. There is a trajectory to our civilization. Of course there is. And our civilization is dying. But no matter what happens to civilization, we cannot do anything to nature. I want you to understand that whatever is in the trajectory here, nothing can happen to nature. For that very reason. Nothing can happen to that. So whatever appears as a calamity right now is these points in time. This is a trajectory. Something has been chosen by consciousness here to experience itself in such manner, in such way. And that's what we are all witnessing, and this is why the conversation is now unfolding in that direction. There are teachers, public speakers out there who are trying to address these things, redress these things. You see? In the perennial traditions, the so-called, you know, from all these impacts, effects, you know, the 100 monkeys, right? That, you know that saying? 100 monkeys. You know that? It's the impact of collective consciousness. It's the shift in gravity shift. 100th monkey, right? It's like no change, no change, no change. Suddenly there is a qualitative change because it reached certain critical proportion. To that notion of 100 holy people or 100 saints in the Sufi tradition. the keepers of light. There's always a number of people, always, by the decree of the Creator, that are here to perform that. Whether they know it, whether they don't know it, it's not in their choosing, according to that understanding in Sufi. Soon as one falls away, dies, whatever, immediately someone else replaces, because that number needs to be maintained. It is this understanding. You see? So this need to be dealt by you once and for all, so that you do not leave yourself in a grey territory where you will allow inadvertently this conflicting energies to play havoc with your system, where you will be corrupted without knowing it, and it will feel a complete contradiction to the whole set of beliefs, because it will feel as if you are here for the right cause, but without living that light, living, embodying it, carrying it, you are subjected to all various sources of corruption. And this is the most subtlest form of corruption. Most subtlest form of corruption is when one is set on the path of righteousness and on the path of kind of like saving something, someone, the world, you see? But the only thing is here is to tend to your garden. The most difficult thing to do. Because this is where the epicenter of the universe. This is the epicenter of the universe if you have that additional understanding which comes from this perspective of what human here represents. Human being here is a totality, a sum total of all the laws of nature embodied here. That concept of fullness here available throughout the marvel of human nervous system. And that is the most difficult thing to do. So if we can assist in the process of self-change, we already changing the world with that. In fact, not in a form of a conscious act. It's not happening because I will now change the world. The world and you are congruent. You and the world become one reality again. Before it was torn. There was you and there was the world. The energy is depleted. In that state, energy is tremendously depleted. The frequency is very, very whatever we may call it, you know, it's not tuned, not refined enough to vibrate in unison. But when that tuning takes place, then there is no difference between you and the world. So every decision takes place in your heart, impacts the world immediately by virtue of that, where space-time no longer exists. You see, the changes are not coming like I will now think of the better future, because that's also a way to work. And legitimate, and we should do that as well. We do that through intentions, when we set these intentions, which still bound and subject to space-time. So these vibrations will have to vibrate, and if these vibrations are strong enough, fine enough, then that resonance would be in the ether, picked up and begin to resonate, because that's the way it is. But in the one in whom this is reconciled, the changes happen instantaneously, because the changes do not subject to space-time. So every battle is won in the heart of the sage and the sibyl. They connect only to the core of their being, and everything is decided there. Whatever is being spoken is less important. It's what happens at the level of the heart. But you need to be convinced about it yourself. You see, you need to arrive to that understanding in a most convincingly peaceful manner, so that you no longer, you become incorruptible. You see? Because the whole point actually is to resonate with this frequency of bliss. This Ananda is what really changes the world, changes the vibrations. Yes, the righteous anger has its place, the fury, all this, and we will hopefully speak about this as well. Yes, it has a place there. But it's incomparable in terms of the impact that Ananda has. So living, this is why it is our duty to live in peace, in bliss, in a state of beatitude. It's our duty, already inborn duty. Everything else is secondary. What our occupation, whether we are success story or not, our primal responsibility here is to first restore that state. So therefore, anyone who kind of somehow feels that they can be pulled into depressions and kind of like, one have to be very quickly find oneself and pull oneself out of the mire by the force of one's own strength, by pulling oneself, like grabbing oneself or getting less and less hair. So if you have a lot of hair, it helps, you know, and you pull yourself out of that depression because you can't afford it. You can't afford to drown in that mire. You can't afford to drown in that muck. And nobody can pull you out of there. So therefore, it's very clearly need to be understood. We all get corrupted. On the way, we get corrupted. We will be corrupted. There will be so many temptations to get corrupted, because that resonance produces this rise of frequency, rise of consciousness produces an opposite wave. This opposite wave acts here within the parameters of this creation, where it, as it were, tries to ground that energy down, not ground in the sense of grounding in a positive aspect, but it tries to counter that, you see, so as to oppose that. It's very well known, proverbial in fact, proverbial. One shall be tested, so to speak, right? When we become uncorruptible, then we can assist in the most direct way, and we cannot begin to define in what way do we assist to all these processes that are now required in this phase of transformation of collective consciousness. So things will get tougher, more difficult, more straightforward in a way as well, because in that polarization, all the lies, all that what masquerades as truth is already steered and floating on the surface as a nasty poo. You know? Before it was all nicely concealed, right? And kind of like had this. Now it's all coming, it's floating, you know? It's a real kind of a cleansing job. Skimming it, it's like out, you know, cleaning it. This is what's happening now. We will, and now already witnessing that on a grand scale. And of course, it also would be sort of a little, I think, to naive to have this like, oh, you know, when will it end now? It's going to get tougher. It's going to get nastier. It's going to get more shakier. Because that's the trajectory as well. Nobody, like, just look at the geopolitical situation, the whole conversation, the whole thing. No, we speak about nuclear war as a reality now. Just 2 months ago, it was impossibility. Now it's a reality. It's a reality, you know. Whatever, Putin, Putler, you know, like it's like Hitler, Putler. It's all convenient names. It's like to, you know, we need to have an evil in the world. In the interview, this British actor, Rai Finesse, you know, or Rai Finesse, I don't know how the various pronunciations. You know who I'm talking about? Very fine, dramatic actor. He was interviewed by this guy, Russian guy, for his newly opened channel in English language. And he asked him, like, you know, would you play Putin, you know, like, and then he keeps asking him, you're known for playing the kind of most evil character, right, in the, you know, in the Harry Potter series, right? Voldemort, you know, like the utmost manifestation of evil. So he tries to goes after Rai Finesse, and like, do you think Putin is like, do you recognize this, your character you played, Voldemort and Putin? It's like, give me a freaking break, you know? It's like no person in the world here, no Hitler, no Stalin, no Mao Zedong, no single human being was here a manifestation of evil. You know, it's a convenient way of dividing constantly and having the scapegoats all the time, because that keeps us clean, it keeps us uninvolved, and also it's very much in that whole game, you see? It's a very in the nature of the game. You know, if we demonize someone strong enough, then our actions will always be saintly, because then we're Saint George killing the dragon. But if we don't if we didn't demonize Saddam Hussein, how can we wake up in the morning and listen on the radio how they bomb the shit out of Iraqi people? I was on the streets of London with my small little Sangha there, my first group of students in 2004. On the streets of London, 2 million people march against Britain's involvement in the second Iraqi campaign against Iraq. The whole Labour Party, the whole was against that invasion. And a single man, Tony Blair, takes the whole country against the will of his own party and against the will of his own people into the military involvement to bomb Saddam Hussein on the grounds of this is being evil. It's evil. It's easy to bomb people when they're evil, you see? This is what we're living through now. This is what we're living through now. So it's going to get tougher, because the antagonism now of this polarization of these energies is about to collide, and it will manifest on all levels. So the show will be grand. It will be real, like a real epical resolution of this. Because nothing else will shake us. Nothing. You see? Europe fancies itself in some kind of democracy games when it actually utterly and entirely dependent since the end of the Second World War. In reality, since the first of the First War. But since the Second World War, Europe was made dependent and lost sovereignty, utterly and entirely. Out of what? Out of fear that Russian tanks will be on Saint-Germain-du-Pré and Russian soldiers will drink cappuccino and coffee in Le Magot, which was reserved for Salvador Dali and Picasso. You can't happen that. You can't make that happen. You see? So democracy needs to be protected at all costs. This is not going to be easy. We're going to see escalation in the next 2 years. In every way. The planet will shake, you know, and so we're kind of like living in a very, very interesting time. Very interesting time. So this needs to be decided by you, you know. Like the whole concept of the climate change also is like completely vaporized now. Because nobody has the time now for that. You know, what dominates the news and the consensus, it's the PR war, you know. It's a PR war going on now, right? Because the empire is dying, American empire is dying. But it's not going to die easily, like all empires die in convulsions. And the empires rise, economical empires rise. One empire declines, another one rises. 20 years ago, people were speaking already when Russia started, because first when Soviet Union collapsed, everyone thought that Russia will be thrown back into Stone Age. And it was only seen in terms of market. Only in terms of like what value it can have in terms of market. Nobody predicted what's going to happen. But 20 years ago already, and during the turn of the century, historians and the economists said that the next rising empire will be India, Russia, and China, with China in the lead. It's happening now. It's happening as we speak. You see? So there are, you know, like if you see this, you know, the conversation is like it's mind-boggling. So you ask me, so like, do I have faith? Do I have like, you know, it's not based on faith. I know light prevails, always prevails. It's in the nature of the light. It always prevails, always. It's a difficult time we live in. But it has this something about the epoch and time we live in when we cannot take lessons in any other way other than through jolting, suffering experiences. Maybe that's what Kali Yuga really is about. In Kali Yuga, they say, most of people turn to God due to suffering. Due to traumas, suffering, due to pain. That's the general picture, the general perspective. So maybe that same principle is applicable to changes. All changes are being brought somehow. Because of course, when I was younger, it always puzzled me. Why is it so difficult? Is it so obviously so straightforward? And the people I've met in the art worlds, and like I was fortunate enough to meet people from very different walks of life. Some very wealthy, astronomically wealthy, you know? They're normal people. They just happen to be like having big yachts, big boats, big empires, you know? The entourage of people who look after one house is like the size of a small company. So, like, what do you do? A social drill there? Socialistic drill to them? You know, hey folks, how about we just distribute your goods? Right? Karl Marx said it's good to distribute. let's share. Doesn't work like that. See, it doesn't work like that. So the destruction of the world is due to the liberal democracy we're so protectingly, reverently engaged in. It's a free market. That's what liberal democracy is. It's a free market. It's not about plowing the field, sowing the crops, knowing the size of the community. This will be enough to store, this will be enough to eat, we will distribute. None of that. Haven't you studied this? These are basics in history, how it rose. None of that works. No. Shit produced to be consumed, and a lot of it is being thrown, dumped out. When people starved, milk was poured into the oceans as a normal kind of procedure. Because you cannot just start distributing milk to people if they're hungry, because it will collapse the market. I mean, this is, of course, a very, very naive language I'm speaking, very, very primitive language. It's not the language of the economists. They will come and explain everything. Well, excuse me, there are banks as well, you know, and the whole thing will become, suddenly will make sense. Suddenly everything will make sense, and actually destruction of the world will also make sense. Because that's the only way. There's no other way. So this is why tantrikas get repossessed. You know, and they walk out of this. They still play this game of this world. But something else is going on. And you can't afford to be corrupted by this. You see? You have to wake up, and your heart vibrates and resonates in that state. It's the primordial, the most important thing. So it's not subject for any negative energy gnawing on it, coming and start eating portions of it, and giving reasons as well why it can do that. Therefore, we fight depression. Just like Neo fought these guys, right, in all the Taekwondo and all the UFC, basically, MMA, all goes, mixed martial arts. Just can't let it win. You can't tour with depression. You can't just think that, you know, I'll be depressed for a couple of days, maybe a couple of months, you know, because it's like, and that's, then, you know, no. It's like standing somewhere and sinking. That's why I gave that example in my exchanges in Belgium. There's a video about that. You know, and then like Baron Münchhausen, who is with his horse drowning in the mire. So very quickly he assessed the situation. Hang on a second, I'm in the mire. I'm on a horse and I'm drowning. Oh, time to get out. How do I get out? And there's nothing to hold on to. So he grabs his mustache. Thankfully, he had big mustaches, well before Salvador Dali. Grabs his by mustaches, okay, holds the horse with his heels, and lifts himself up with the horse, because, you know, out of the mire, like that. You know, that's how we work. There's no other way. So just sleep on it.